So tell us all about Born of Blood and Ash. It's the last book in the series. Was it a bit of an emotional one writing?
Yeah, I think any last book in a series is always like bittersweet. I mean, at least for me, there's always a point in writing every book where I'm so done with it. And I just want to kill all the characters and just, announce new characters halfway through and be like, spoiler, everybody's dead. Here's the new characters. But you do like when you work as with book, in that world for so long, they do almost become real to you for a while. And and it's not so much that case with this book because this series is the prequel to the main series, The Blood and Ash, and the characters that you see in the Flesh and Fire series, you will see again in Blood and Ash. So I don't it's not like I'm saying goodbye to them yet.
Yeah.
Um, but that does make it more complicated because you have two timelines basically that you have to keep straight that is in almost the same world in a way. And it makes it a little bit more complicated, but it is the final book for this series. And what it's basically doing is in the Blood and Ash world, you learn that there are gods that the people in the kingdom worship. And I knew that there was like this story behind a lot of what was told about the gods weren't true. Like basically what happens in history to us, right? Where you have all these versions told over so many years, you really no longer know what is the truth, but there may be a kernel of truth in it. And when I was like, I think it was like book two or no, book two or three of from the Blood and Ash series, I was like, I was having to kind of summarize it in that book. And then I realized, okay, wait a minute. Instead of me summarizing it, like I should maybe tell how this happened. And that's where the Flesh and Fire series came from. So you basically are in that series, you're learning about what some of the things that happened that made the world that you see in Blood and Ash the way that it is. And so that's where the idea came from. So you get also, there's a lot of questions from both series that they finally get answered in this series. So you don't have to read the Blood and Ash series. This can be read ahead of that. It probably is beneficial to you to do that. But it's really kind of paves the way for the next book in the Blood and Ash series too.
Nice. I like the continuity there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun, isn't it? Just like playing around with the series. Are they different time periods or are these sort of all quite close together?
No, it's so funny. I always have readers, they want to know the exact amount of years, exactly probably the month. And I
Yeah.
refuse to say it. And the only reason why is because I will forget what I said.
Yeah.
And they will be somebody who is much smarter than me, who's going to sit down, read these books, and actually figure out the year, the month, the day, and the time difference. And it'll be completely incorrect from what I said. So I always give like this range, but I always say it's several hundred to 1,000 years.
Oh,
And
nice.
because
Yeah.
I kind of looked at like in our history of like you look at like for example the Roman Empire, right? Like how advanced that was compared to everything that came after that, and how many years had to pass before society started to once again start doing what was done in the empire then. So that was kind of how I imagine it would have to be that amount of years would have to pass.
Nice.
um, but it's good in a way because it keeps the actual timelines different enough that I don't get them confused. But it's like I have to remember when I'm in the Blood and Ash world, there's certain things that those characters wouldn't know. Um, so it can get a little
Yeah.
complicated in that way.
Yeah. I suppose it's nice to plant a few seeds as well for the
Yeah.
next series all that time. Nice. But did you have a favorite part of this book without giving any spoilers away?
Yeah, there are a couple of scenes that I knew that I would always write. And I knew this when I wrote the second or third book in Blood and Ash. Like there's a scene in the third book, the Blood and Ash series, that you finally something is mentioned and you actually finally see it, what they're referencing. And so I always knew that was coming. I was excited to write that. There is also some stuff that happens in this book that I wouldn't say, because it's gonna make me sound demented if I said it was my favorite scene, but I feel like they are because they're powerful in a way that anybody who has a lot of power, they're not gonna be they're not gonna always be good, and they're not gonna always be able to make the right decision. It doesn't mean that they're bad, but that doesn't mean that, like, basically, it's kind of showing. I've always believed this, like, no one should have ultimate power. Like, it's going, like that saying, it will corrupt at some point. And or you will, in your anger, do something that is
Yeah.
just as terrible as what you're angry with. And so there's some, I knew that I was going to finally get to that point in the series where you can understand how the people, how they decided that they should not have, like, they should have, I'm trying to describe this without spoilers. So but basically you see why certain decisions were made about who has absolute power. Because nobody, I don't feel like, can truly wield that
Yeah.
appropriately. Something's gonna happen. And they were hard scenes to write because I feel like one thing a lot of books do, whether they're fantasy, right? Whether they're dealing with aliens or vampires or gods, they kind of mirror real life things that happen. And where it's like one of the themes in this book and in this series is, at what point does anger turn to vengeance? And once it becomes that, are you any better than that what you are fighting against? And knowing that I was finally getting to that point in writing it, it was my favorite part to write, but it was also the hardest because I feel like you can look to the world and see examples of that where there's no good people here, like in this
Yeah.
situation. And I think it makes even fantasy books just so realistic because, again, I feel like you can look to outside and see examples of this kind of stuff.